The messages on my cell phone arrived while I was in the office, finishing another ordinary day at work. "It was my friend, I don't know how to tell you this," he wrote, followed by a photo that made my stomach turn. My wife, laughing by candlelight, holding another man's hand at a romantic dinner. My heart raced and my mind went in directions I had never imagined. I tried to make sense of it, to grasp for some excuse or justification for what my eyes were seeing. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe it was a client, or an old friend. But there was something about the way she looked at him, something so intimate and forbidden, that I knew deep down that there was no possible justification. Still, I needed proof. My friend, knowing the impact this would have, kept sending messages. I saw the two of them entering the restaurant together. They were smiling, they seemed completely at ease. "I don't want to pry, but I thought I needed to tell you. I knew I had to see for myself." When I got home that evening, she greeted me as usual, a kiss on the cheek, a sweet smile and a casual question about my day. Everything seemed so normal that for a moment I wondered if there was some plausible explanation for what I had seen. But the image of that photo burned me inside, like an open wound that wouldn't stop throbbing. "How was your day?" I asked, my voice more controlled than I thought possible. "Normal," she replied, distracted. The smell of her perfume seemed stronger than usual, as if she had just finished getting ready. That night, I lay next to her in bed and listened to her quiet breathing as she slept. I wanted to ask her, to confront her right then and there, but something in me wouldn't let me. Perhaps it was the fear of the answer, or the desperate hope that it was all just a mistake. Instead, I spent hours staring at the ceiling, my head spinning with scenarios and questions that I didn't know if I was prepared to face. The next few days were a game of appearances. She continued with her impeccable routine, while I pretended nothing was wrong, watching every move, every little detail. Her phone vibrated more than usual, and she smiled at the screen in a way she hadn't done for years when we were together. I began to notice the absences, the excuses that I used to accept without question. "I'm going to the market, I need to sort something out at work." It all seemed perfectly innocent, but now I saw it in a new light. Finally, a small but revealing detail emerged. The smell of another perfume, something masculine and woody, which wasn't mine. It was on her clothes, mixed with hers, and it was like a silent confirmation of what I had already feared. I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to know the truth. "Shall we talk?" I asked one evening, as she was getting ready to leave. Her expression changed, slightly tense, but she soon pulled herself together. "Sure, about what?" I took a deep breath, feeling my heart beating so hard that it seemed to echo in the room. "About us. I feel like you're distant." She smiled, but it was a rehearsed, empty smile. "I don't know what you're talking about." "It's okay." But I knew it wasn't. And she knew that I knew. The next day, I followed her. It was something I'd never imagined doing, but the need for answers overcame any hesitation. I watched as she entered a cafe, her posture relaxed, like someone who had nothing to hide. A few minutes later, he appeared. The man in the photo. They hugged, something intimate and long, and sat down at a table in the corner. My chest ached in a way I didn't know was possible, but I continued to watch, even though their every move was like a knife being plunged into me. They laughed, exchanged glances that I recognized, the same glances she gave me in the early years of our marriage. That's when he leaned over and touched her face with a tenderness that made me feel like a stranger in my own life. I took photos, not because I planned to use them, but because I needed something tangible to remind me that it was real. When she came home that night, I looked at her as if I were seeing someone else. She tried to act normal, but something in me had changed. "How was your day?" I asked, my voice calm but full of subtext. "Tiring," she replied, without looking me in the eye. The next morning, I went to the lawyer. There was no turning back. What followed was a whirlwind of emotions and revelations that I could never have predicted. I discovered that the man wasn't just any lover, but someone who had much bigger plans for her, and, indirectly, for me. He wasn't just emotionally involved, he was using her proximity to access information about me and my business. She had no idea she was being manipulated, or perhaps she knew and chose to ignore it. As all the pieces fell into place, I realized that my betrayal went far beyond heartbreak. It was a game of interests and lies that could destroy not only our marriage, but everything I had built over the course of my life. And at the center of it all was her, the woman I thought I knew better than myself. What I did next would define not only my future, but hers too. Every decision, every word, every move had to be calculated. After all, the truth can be just as devastating as a lie, and sometimes what you find out is just the beginning of the real nightmare. Welcome to the channel where we explore stories of love, deceit and betrayal, but here, we make one thing clear, we don't support any kind of betrayal. All the stories are fictional and exist to show how betrayal destroys lives, breaks trust and leaves deep scars. Get ready for an intense narrative, full of emotions, twists and life lessons. Adjust the volume, because today's story promises to be shocking and unforgettable. Have a good listen. Lucas and Mariana were a couple who, at first glance, seemed to be the embodiment of a solid and lasting union. They had been together for over a decade, and the beginning of their relationship was marked by a youthful enthusiasm, full of shared dreams and promises of eternal love. Lucas, a practical and dedicated man, worked as a financial advisor. He was the kind of person everyone described as reliable, someone you could trust with any secret or responsibility. His life was organized, almost methodical, and he was proud of it. Mariana, on the other hand, was vibrant, spontaneous, a talented artist who saw the world with a look of enchantment. It was this contrast between the two that made their relationship seem balanced, where Lucas brought stability, Mariana offered color and lightness. The house they built together was a reflection of this dynamic. In every corner, there were elements that combined functionality and creativity. Lucas' office, with its straight lines and minimalist decor, contrasted with Mariana's art studio, a space full of unfinished canvases, scattered brushes and paint stains on the floor. Their home seemed complete, not just because of its aesthetics, but because of the way each of them found a space that represented their essence within that life together. Lucas believed that their marriage was one of the few that would stand the test of time. He could feel it in the small gestures of everyday life, the morning conversations over a fresh coffee, the hugs before bed, the laughter shared in seemingly banal moments. And for many years, these moments were truly genuine, filled with a complicity that only those who share a life so deeply know. However, as time went by, some cracks began to appear. They weren't obvious, not even something that Lucas or Mariana mentioned out loud, but they were there. A lack of enthusiasm here, a prolonged silence there. Mariana, despite being the most outgoing person in the relationship, began to spend more time alone. She said she needed inspiration for her artwork, and Lucas didn't question it. He knew that her art was an important part of who she was, so he made a point of not interfering. But over time, the emotional distance she seemed to cultivate began to bother him. Lucas noticed subtle changes, such as Mariana being more absent during meals or avoiding eye contact at certain times. However, whenever he tried to approach her, she deflected the subject with grace and a smile that, although beautiful, no longer seemed as genuine as before. The couple's friends often praised their relationship, saying that they were an example of partnership. During dinners and social gatherings, they still maintained an image of unity, but Lucas knew something was missing. He couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. Sometimes he thought the problem was with him. Perhaps he had become too predictable, someone Mariana saw more as a familiar figure than a passionate partner. At other times, he thought it might just be the weight of the years, a kind of natural wear and tear that all couples face. Mariana, for her part, struggled with feelings she didn't know how to express. There was a growing emptiness inside her, something that neither art, nor marriage, nor the small gestures of affection she still received from Lucas could fill. It was as if a part of her was adrift, without direction. She loved Lucas in a way she couldn't explain, but that love no longer made her vibrate like it used to. It wasn't his fault, she told herself, but something that was wrong with her. Still, she didn't know how to fix it. Lucas was attentive. He always paid attention to details, like the way Mariana fiddled with her hair when she was nervous or how her voice changed slightly when something was bothering her. He noticed these changes, but preferred to give her space, believing that a little freedom could help. He began to bring her flowers for no apparent reason, to prepare small surprises, such as a candlelit dinner at home. Although Mariana appreciated these attitudes, they no longer had the same impact. She would smile, say thank you, but then sink back into that unsettling silence. The couple's social circle also reflected the duality of their personalities. Lucas had few but loyal friends, men with whom he shared conversations about work, sports and the complexities of adult life. Mariana, on the other hand, was surrounded by a wider and more diverse group, including fellow artists, eccentric people and friends who always encouraged her to explore new possibilities. Among these friends was a man who was beginning to stand out, but whom Lucas barely knew. Mariana talked about him occasionally, describing him as engaging and intelligent. Lucas listened without suspicion. After all, he trusted his wife and the integrity of their relationship. On one particular day, something happened that aroused a strange feeling in Lucas. He had arrived home earlier than usual, hoping to surprise Mariana with a special dinner. When he entered, he found her art studio empty, but something in the air was different. The scent of a masculine perfume, discreet but distinct, seemed to permeate the room. Lucas tried to ignore the discomfort, convincing himself that perhaps it was a mistaken impression. But the sensation remained, like a lingering shadow in his thoughts. When Mariana returned home that evening, she acted as if nothing had happened. She talked normally, as she always did, but Lucas sensed that there was something in her gestures, something he couldn't identify exactly, but which made him uneasy. It was a kind of disconnection, as if she were physically present but emotionally distant. He decided not to confront her. He preferred to keep that feeling to himself and observe it more closely over the next few days. Daily life continued, and the two of them maintained the routines they had established over the years. However, for Lucas, every interaction with Mariana seemed like a little puzzle that he was trying to decipher. He began to notice patterns that had previously gone unnoticed, such as the times she went out, the places she said she went and the explanations she gave. None of this seemed out of the ordinary, but Lucas knew that his intuition had never fooled him before. Mariana, on the other hand, continued to live on an emotional roller coaster. There were times when she felt overwhelming guilt, as if every step she took was a betrayal not only of Lucas, but of the life they had built together. At other times, she convinced herself that she was just searching for something she had lost inside herself, something that could help her reconnect with who she was before she became a wife, before she became part of an us. Lucas and Mariana were locked in a silent dance, where every movement seemed carefully calculated to avoid a collision. However, the tension between them was palpable, growing with each passing day. Lucas was trying to convince himself that things could go back to normal, while Mariana was fighting feelings that even she didn't fully understand. They were both on the verge of something they couldn't yet name, but which would change their lives forever. Lucas began to notice that, over the last few months, there had been a growing disconnect in his relationship with Mariana. He didn't know if it was just his mind playing tricks on him or if something was really wrong. So he decided to devote more time to his wife, looking for ways to rekindle the flame that gradually seemed to have gone out. Flowers, dinners and short trips were part of his attempts. Mariana always thanked him, smiled and seemed genuinely happy, but there was a weight to her gestures, as if she were carrying something invisible, a barrier that prevented Lucas from reaching her completely. Over the next few days, he continued to notice subtle changes. Mariana began to spend more time away, justifying her absences with art-related commitments. "I need to connect with other artists, to find inspiration," she said. Although these words made sense, there was something in her tone that made Lucas uneasy. She seemed to choose her words carefully, like someone walking on a thin layer of ice, fearing that any slip might reveal more than she should. One afternoon, while tidying up his office, Lucas found a business card among Mariana's papers. The name on the card was unfamiliar to him, but something about it bothered him. It was from a man, apparently an art curator. Lucas tried to dispel his suspicion, rationalizing that it was normal for Mariana to have professional contacts of this kind. However, something about the card seemed out of place. He put it in his pocket, not knowing exactly why, but feeling that he should keep it close. Mariana, for her part, was being consumed by an avalanche of conflicting emotions. She felt guilt, shame and, at the same time, a strange and dangerous excitement. She didn't know how she'd gotten into this situation, but now she seemed to be stuck in it. The messages on her cell phone were constant, and the encounters that had initially been casual began to become frequent. Every time she left the house, her heart raced, fearing that Lucas might find out. But deep down, there was a part of her that seemed to defy the risk, as if she was attracted by the danger of being on the edge of an abyss. Lucas also began to notice the smiles on her face, different smiles that seemed to appear spontaneously as she looked at her cell phone. He knew that she usually had animated conversations with friends, but there was something else about these smiles, something that made him uncomfortable. He tried to ignore it, but the feeling that he was losing control of his own life grew with each passing day. One day, over lunch, Lucas decided to ask Mariana a casual question. "You've been going out a lot lately. Any news on your art projects?" Her reply was quick, but filled with a disguised tension. "Oh, nothing much, just some meetings and exhibitions I'm trying to organize." Lucas nodded, but noticed that she looked away immediately after answering, as if avoiding eye contact. Not wanting to arouse suspicions, he decided not to press her. However, the unease inside him grew. It was then that he turned to a close friend, someone he trusted completely. "I've noticed some strange things at home. I don't know if it's all in my head or if there's something going on," he told his friend, who listened attentively. After a long silence, the friend suggested, "Perhaps you should try to find out more about these meetings. Not to accuse her, but to understand if there's anything you can do to help her." The suggestion stuck in Lucas' mind, and he began to pay even more attention to the details. One day, Mariana left her cell phone in the kitchen while she went upstairs to take a shower. Lucas hesitated, but curiosity and fear of the unknown overcame him. He unlocked the device and saw recent messages from a number he didn't recognize. The messages were short, but there was something about them that bothered him. "Meeting arranged. Can't wait to see you." It was like a punch in the stomach. He put his cell phone back and tried to stay calm, but the world around him seemed to spin. That night, while Mariana slept, Lucas felt loneliness for the first time in his own home. He spent hours trying to understand what he had just discovered. He was sure that something was going on, but he still had no concrete proof. Doubt ate away at him, and he knew he needed answers. The following week, he decided to follow Mariana discreetly. He wanted to trust her, but his intuition pushed him to find out the truth. She left the house claiming to have a meeting with other artists, and Lucas followed her at a safe distance. After a few minutes, she parked in front of a cafe. Lucas parked his car a little further on and watched as she went inside. Shortly afterwards, a man appeared, the same name as on the business card Lucas had found. The two greeted each other with a familiarity that was enough to confirm Lucas' worst fears. He stayed in the car, watching from afar as the pain settled in his chest. They talked, laughed and seemed completely at ease. Mariana touched the man's arm with a naturalness that Lucas hadn't seen in his interactions with her for years. It was as if she were a version of herself that he no longer recognized. After about an hour, the two of them left the cafe together, getting into his car and driving off somewhere else. Lucas, paralyzed by the discovery, didn't follow them. He sat in the car, staring at the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. Everything he had built, everything he believed in, seemed to fall apart at that moment. He drove home, still in shock, and spent the rest of the day trying to understand how it had happened. Mariana returned later that evening, acting as if nothing had happened. Lucas, now aware of the truth, realized how adept she had become at hiding her double life. He decided to wait before confronting her. He needed to plan how he would deal with it. He needed more information, something that would leave him and her in no doubt. At the same time, he began to realize that perhaps there was something bigger behind the betrayal, something he hadn't yet discovered, but which was already changing his life irreversibly. Lucas had felt the weight of the betrayal crushing him since the night he saw Mariana with another man. The last few days had been a mixture of heavy silence and averted glances, as he tried to decide how to act. He knew that confronting her without a plan would be a mistake. He needed to fully understand what was going on before confronting the situation. He mentally relived every detail of the encounter he had witnessed, every gesture of Mariana's that seemed to confirm his suspicions. But the betrayal itself wasn't what tormented him most, it was the feeling that there was something more, something she was hiding and that he couldn't identify. That night, Lucas waited for Mariana to go out again, as she often did. He knew where she was going. He followed her to the apartment of the man he had seen her with before. This time, he decided to act. As soon as he saw Mariana enter, he waited for a few minutes and then parked in front of the building. He climbed the stairs with heavy steps, feeling a mixture of anger and anxiety dominate his thoughts. When he reached the door, he took a deep breath before knocking. 3 firm knocks. The sound echoed down the corridor. The door opened slowly, and there stood Mariana, surprised and pale. Before she could say anything, Lucas walked in, passing her without asking permission. The man was sitting on the sofa, visibly uncomfortable with Lucas' sudden presence. "Can you explain to me what's going on?" Lucas said, staring at Mariana. His voice was controlled, but carried an intensity that made the room seem smaller. "Lucas, I can explain," Mariana began, but he interrupted her. "I didn't come here to hear excuses. I want the truth. The whole truth. And don't tell me it's just a misunderstanding, because I saw you." He looked at the man on the sofa, who seemed as bewildered as Mariana. "Lucas, please," she begged, but he insisted. "Who is he? And why are you here with him? How long have you been lying to me?" His voice, now louder, echoed off the walls. The man stood up and tried to intervene. "I think we can resolve this in a civilized way. It doesn't have to be like this, it doesn't have to be like this." Lucas interrupted, laughing bitterly. "You're the man who destroyed my marriage, and you think you can tell me how to deal with it? Who do you think you are?" Mariana put her hands to her face, as if to hide from the weight of the situation. But Lucas didn't back down. He wanted answers, and he wanted them now. "Talk," he demanded, glaring at her. "You owe me." Mariana took a deep breath, trying to gather the courage to say what needed to be said. "I didn't want you to find out like this. It wasn't supposed to be like this. So what was the plan?" Lucas asked, his voice icy. "Fool me until when?" Mariana hesitated before speaking again. "It's not just about us, Lucas. There's more going on, things you don't understand." "Then explain it to me," he demanded, losing patience. "Make me understand." It was at this point that the man intervened again, this time with more determination. "Lucas, I think you deserve to know everything. I'm not here to steal your wife. He stopped, as if the words weighed too much. "I'm here because she needed help. It's not just about betrayal. It's more complicated than that." Lucas looked at him, confused. "Help? What kind of help?" Mariana finally found the strength to speak. "Lucas, I never wanted to hurt you. But, he's not just someone I met recently. He's someone I've known for a long time. The silence that followed her words was almost deafening. Lucas felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. What do you mean? He's my brother, Mariana revealed, her voice trembling. The revelation dropped like a bomb in the room. Lucas blinked several times, trying to process what he had just heard. Your brother? That doesn't make sense. You never mentioned that you had a brother. Because I couldn't, Mariana explained. My family has always been complicated, and I grew up without contact with him. He contacted me recently, needing help, and I didn't know how to explain it to you without arousing suspicion. Lucas shook his head, still incredulous. So you lie, hide everything and make me think you're having an affair? Do you have any idea what that did to me? I was afraid, Mariana admitted. Afraid of how you would react, afraid of opening up a part of my life that I've always tried to forget. I've made mistakes, but I'm not having an affair. Please believe me. The man nodded, looking embarrassed. I came to her because there was no one else. My life had turned upside down and I needed support. Lucas looked at them both, feeling a mixture of relief and anger. And you thought the best way to deal with it was to leave me in the dark. You two made it much worse than it needed to be. I know, Mariana said, with tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you from the start. Lucas took a deep breath, trying to find clarity amidst the confusion. This doesn't erase the pain you've caused. It doesn't erase the days when I thought you had betrayed me. I understand, Mariana replied. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to win back your trust. Silence returned to the room, but this time it was different. It was a silence full of possibilities, of an uncertain future, but perhaps not as bleak as Lucas had feared. He knew he would need time to process everything, but he also knew that this was a truth he never expected to discover. The heavy silence that hung in the room seemed to compress the air, making each breath more difficult. Lucas remained motionless, staring at Mariana and the man in front of him, trying to put together the pieces of everything he had discovered. The revelation that the man was Mariana's brother didn't erase the pain he felt. On the contrary, it seemed to intensify the discomfort, mixing anger and relief in a whirlwind that he couldn't control. Why now? Lucas asked, his voice lower but still charged with tension. He wasn't looking directly at Mariana, but at some undefined point on the ground, as if searching for answers in places where they weren't. If he really is your brother, why show up just now? Why hide it from me? Mariana seemed to be searching for the strength to answer. I didn't know how to deal with it. When he showed up, after so many years, I wasn't sure how you would react. We built our life on a foundation of trust, but this was a part of my story that I always wanted to forget. The man, still visibly uncomfortable, intervened. I understand how it might seem. But please try to understand me too. I had nowhere else to go. I'm not here to cause problems in your marriage. Lucas raised his hand, asking for silence. I don't want to hear any excuses. Not now. He finally lifted his gaze, staring at Mariana. I spent weeks questioning your every move, your every word. Feeling like a stranger in my own home. Do you have any idea how it destroyed me? She nodded, her eyes filled with tears, but said nothing. Lucas took a deep breath, trying to contain his growing frustration. I'd give you anything, Mariana. Anything. But you chose to deal with it alone, as if I couldn't be trusted. He began to walk around the room, running his hands through his hair, trying to find some clarity amidst the confusion. Mariana took a hesitant step forward. Lucas, I know I made mistakes. I know I should have told you everything from the start. But I was afraid. I didn't want my past history to ruin what we'd built together. You don't understand anything, do you? He stopped walking and turned to her, his eyes full of pain. What destroyed everything wasn't your past, but the way you decided to deal with it. Hiding it, lying, making me believe that you were betraying our life. That's what broke everything. The weight of his words fell on her like a blow. Mariana looked at her brother, who seemed as lost as she was, but knew that this moment had to be faced. "Lucas, I want to fix this. I don't know how, but I want to. Please tell me what I can do." Lucas laughed bitterly, without humor. "Do you think you can fix this with words? Mariana, I spent nights awake, wondering where you were, who you were with. Doubting everything we had. It's not something you can erase with promises." The man tried once again to intervene. "Lucas, I know this is my fault too. I was selfish to approach her like that. But I needed help. I was desperate." Lucas turned to him, his eyes now filled with a mixture of anger and curiosity. "Desperate about what? Why look for your sister now, after all these years? What's the real reason for all this?" There was a moment's hesitation, and the man finally gave in. "I'm involved in something complicated. It's not something I'm proud of, but I needed someone I could trust. And Mariana was the only family I had." Lucas crossed his arms, evaluating the words with skepticism. "And what exactly is this complicated thing?" The man looked away, seeming to weigh each word before answering. "Debts. With the wrong people. I had nowhere else to go. I thought that maybe, if I got Mariana's support, I could get out of it. But I didn't want to involve her too much. I didn't want to expose her to that world." Lucas laughed again, now more bitterly. "So you show up out of the blue, bring all this chaos into our lives and expect me to just understand? Do you think that's reasonable?" Mariana intervened, her voice pleading. "Lucas, I know it sounds terrible. But I was trying to help him. He's my family. And, deep down, I thought I could resolve this without you needing to know." "Without me needing to know?" Lucas repeated, incredulous. "That's your justification? Do you know what marriage means? Trust, transparency, facing everything together. But you decided it was easier to deal with it alone, as if I wasn't part of your life." The tension in the room was palpable. Mariana cried silently, while her brother remained motionless, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Lucas, on the other hand, seemed torn between anger and sadness. He knew that things would never be the same. Not after that. "I need time," Lucas finally said, breaking the silence. "Time to understand what to do with all this. I can't just pretend that nothing happened. You two, leave me alone for now." Mariana tried to move closer, but he held up his hand again. "Please. I need to be alone." She nodded reluctantly and took a step back. Lucas left the apartment, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. As he walked down the street, he realized that he didn't know where he was going. He only knew that he needed distance, space to think, to process everything. What he didn't know was that the real test was yet to come, something that would challenge not only his patience, but also his capacity to forgive. The silence of the night seemed to grow heavier as Lucas walked aimlessly through the streets, thoughts scrambling in his mind. The betrayal he believed he had discovered had turned into something different, but no less devastating. Mariana had hidden a part of her life, a part that now seemed to cast a shadow over everything they had built together. He wondered if it was possible to move on, to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. In the days that followed, Lucas avoided any direct confrontation. He stayed at the house of a close friend, someone who welcomed him without asking too many questions. The space gave him time to reflect, but also left him with the growing feeling that something was yet to come. The revelation about Mariana's brother and the debts to dangerous people still weighed on him like a time bomb about to explode. Mariana, on the other hand, felt paralyzed. The distance from Lucas was painful, but she knew she had caused it. Her attempt to protect her brother had been a resounding failure, and now she faced not only Lucas' distrust, but also the possibility of losing the man she loved forever. She tried to contact him, sending short messages, but Lucas wouldn't answer. His silence was her greatest punishment. Meanwhile, Mariana's brother Daniel was also facing the consequences of his choices. He knew that his presence had destabilized his sister's marriage, and guilt was eating away at him. But the problems he was facing couldn't be put off for long. The people he owed money to were getting impatient, and he knew he needed to find a solution quickly, or things could take an even more dangerous turn. It was on a particularly cold night that Lucas decided to return home. He knew he couldn't keep running away from the situation. Mariana was there, sitting on the sofa in the living room, as if waiting for him. When he came in, she stood up, surprised and relieved at the same time. "Lucas," she began, but he held up his hand to interrupt her. "I just want to hear the truth, Mariana. The whole truth. No beating around the bush, no secrets." She nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "I hid Daniel because he needed help, and I was afraid to involve you in it. But it was a mistake. I know that now." "Afraid of getting involved?" Lucas repeated, his voice laden with bitterness. "We're married, Mariana. That means facing things together. But you decided I wasn't worthy of knowing." Mariana took a deep breath, gathering the courage to continue. "I didn't want to expose you to what he was facing. He got himself into something dangerous, and I thought I could sort it out without you knowing." "Well, you failed," Lucas said coldly. "And now we're all in the middle of it. So tell me, what exactly did he do?" Mariana hesitated for a moment before explaining. "He owes money to people, dangerous people. He tried to get out of it on his own, but he couldn't. That's why he came to me." Lucas shook his head in frustration. "And what did you do to help him? Where did you think the money would come from to pay off these debts?" She didn't answer immediately, but Lucas saw the answer in her eyes. "Did you think of using our money? The money we've saved for years?" "I haven't done that," she answered quickly. "But I did think about it. I thought it might be the only way." Lucas took a step back, as if he had been physically hit. "So you were willing to sacrifice everything for him? For someone who wasn't even part of your life until a few months ago?" Mariana began to cry, but Lucas felt no empathy. The anger and hurt inside him were too deep. Before they could continue, the sound of loud knocks on the door interrupted the conversation. Lucas looked at Mariana, who seemed terrified. "It's them, isn't it?" he asked, his voice cold. She nodded, unable to speak. Lucas opened the door, finding two men with stern expressions. "Where's Daniel?" one of them asked bluntly. Lucas stared at them for a moment before answering. "He's not here. And, honestly, I don't know where he is. But if he owes you something, he needs to deal with it. Not my wife. Not me." The men looked at each other before one of them said, "We'll find him. But if he doesn't pay, we'll come back. And you'll be next." Lucas closed the door, feeling the weight of the threat hanging over them. He looked at Mariana, who was trembling. "This is what happens when you try to deal with things like this on your own," he said, his voice full of frustration. Mariana tried to move closer, but Lucas backed away. "I need time to think, Mariana. About us. About everything." In the days that followed, Daniel finally decided to give himself up to the men who were chasing him. He managed to negotiate a deal, but it came at a high price. He would have to work for them until every penny was paid, which meant putting himself in an even more dangerous world. Before leaving, he left a message for Mariana, thanking her for trying to help him, but asking her to move on with her life. Lucas, for his part, made the difficult decision to separate from Mariana. Although he still loved her, he knew that the trust between them had been destroyed. He needed peace, something he couldn't find while he was with her. Mariana, devastated, returned to her art, trying to find solace in her canvases and brushes. She knew it would take time to rebuild, but she was determined to do it, even if it was alone. Lucas moved on, finding a new beginning elsewhere. Although he still bore the scars of what had happened, He knew he had done the best he could in such difficult circumstances. Life went on, however, unexpectedly. And so everyone involved faced the consequences of their choices, learning, each in their own way, that trust is a fragile thing, and that your actions can resonate far beyond what you imagine. What did you think of this story? Leave your comment and your opinion. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And remember, we don't support any kind of betrayal here. See you next time.